This is obviously a very special and a very exciting day for all of us here at Vertex. And so mostly I want to thank all of you for coming here this morning and celebrating with us. It's just so wonderful to see so many friends from the CF community, friends from the political community. I always say that Vertex is like a huge family, inside and outside, all working together to cure CF. And by bringing everybody together here and seeing you all, it's a very special thing. It reminds us of why all of us come into work every day and the work that we still have to do. I do want to introduce several special guests. Can't introduce everybody, I apologize. So if I forget you, it's not personal. It's just we have a limited amount of time. I want to start with Mayor Marty Walsh, who's standing back here. Mayor Walsh has been a very long-time supporter of Vertex and equally important of the Seaport. I always say I think it's fair to say that without his help, this building would have never been built. That was before he was mayor. And certainly once he became mayor, the Seaport and the Innovation District would never have come together as quickly as it has without his help and support. On the other side of the equation, and very importantly, he's also an enormous supporter of education, STEM education and Boston Public School education. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. But again, I think his leadership in this area has been absolutely instrumental, so it's a pleasure to have him here. I'll introduce, in his absence, at least temporarily, Congressman Joe Kennedy III. He promises me he will be here at 11 o'clock. He had another event. I'm going to hold him to that promise. Congressman Kennedy has been also a longtime friend of Vertex. He's one of those rare politicians who's actually a scientist. I don't know how many of you know that. He's a Stanford-trained engineer. So he gets science and he gets STEM education. But he's also just an enormous believer in the importance of education to untap the potential of kids, not only here in the Commonwealth, but across the country. And I have the pleasure of serving with him as the co-chair of the Governor's STEM Council here in Massachusetts, and he does amazing work. Superintendent Tommy Chang, who was standing back here, Superintendent Chang, has been a tremendous partner, particularly in our STEAM initiatives. We're going to talk about those a little bit. He's a champion for students across Boston. He's been a big supporter of our Learning Lab here in Vertex, as well as STEM Week, which we help put on every year. So thank you for coming, Superintendent. Joe O'Donnell, there's Joe. I don't know what to say about Joe. There is no one more important in the CF community from my perspective. For 40 years, Joe has been working tirelessly. The foundation, the CF Foundation, I think never would have started or been as successful without Joe's involvement. He knows families from across the country. He's raised more money or helped raise more money for CF than anyone else. He's been a huge friend to Vertex and supporter of Vertex and our medicines. And Joe, thank you very much for coming today. Lauren Weeks. Where's Lauren? There she is. Her husband, Kyle, and her mom, Lee. Lauren's actually an Orkambi patient. You're going to hear from her in a few minutes, so I'm not going to steal her thunder or introduce her further. She's an incredibly articulate, successful young woman who I think tells the story of CF and Orkambi better than almost anyone. Thank you for coming. So today is not about medicines. It's actually all about giving back. That's the theme of what we're going to talk about. And you know, as I was thinking about this, giving back is something that's just a part of Vertex, going back 30 years. I often say it's in our DNA. But as we've evolved as a company and grown more successful and a lot bigger over the last 3 to 5 years with a lot more medicines for a lot more patients, we decided it was time to really expand and extend and focus our giving back in a completely different way. And that's what we're really here to do today. So I'm delighted to announce today a 10-year, $500 million Vertex corporate giving commitment. And that commitment is focused on 4 areas where we believe we can have the most impact for patients and in our communities. The first area is helping children with serious diseases like CF, and not only children, but their families, their parents, their siblings, and their caregivers. And that includes things like expanding our access programs to make sure that when we develop new medicines, all patients can have access to them regardless of their ability to pay for them. Things like free drug and things like copay assistance that we've been doing for a long time. And as we make more medicines for more patients, that will expand very dramatically over the next 10 years. Our All In for CF scholarship program for patients and their families with CF. This was a great idea that some of our employees had, that to give scholarships to the siblings of patients who have CF to make sure that the entire family is taken care of, not just the patients. our Circle of Care grants for the CF community to do special things about living with CF. It's not so easy, as many of you know, if you're a family with a CF child, to live with CF. So everything from cookbooks that are CF friendly to lifestyle tips, ways of adjusting the treatment with your lifestyle, and programs and grants that we sponsor, which we also plan to expand considerably. So we have many folks from the CF community here today. Again, I apologize if I don't mention some of them, but I do want to mention Patrick and Martha Marshall, standing over here. Patrick and Marshall have a daughter named Kate, who I think is 18 now, and in college, she's been a patient on one of our medicines. She is just an amazing person. She's a student athlete. She's accomplished so much, despite the fact that she has CF, and as she says, it's just never stopped her. So thank you for joining us. We tried to get her out of school today, but she wouldn't come. The Hearts for Hope Foundation and Megan's Light Foundation, many representatives both here today. These are two organizations that have done so much for raising funds for CF, but also awareness about CF. And we're going to come back to some of the artwork that they've made in a few moments. Pam Spitzer and Carol Bradstreet, who are over here from the local CFF chapter. I can't count the number of CF Great Strides walks we've done with you here and other events, cookouts, and things where you bring ice cream to Vertex. You're just tremendous supporters of Vertex, and we appreciate all that you do for us. The second area of emphasis for our giving program is STEAM education. And I sort of want to emphasize STEAM because most people think of STEM, and we've added the A, which is for the arts. And the idea here is really simple. We believe that STEAM education is the future for kids around the city of Boston, around the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and around the world. That it unlocks their potential and allows them to contribute in a very meaningful way to the future. As you know, we've developed a pipeline program around STEAM education, starting actually all the way back in freshman year in high school and going all the way through to postdoctoral fellowships and young faculty awards. We do have the Learning Lab, a 3,000 square foot lab that we built in this building that's dedicated to Boston Public School kids. We have Melody Knowlton. I saw Melody before. Where are you, Melody? Here she is. A fantastic teacher who staffs that lab, and then our employees volunteer to teach more than 1,000 Boston Public School kids each year about science and technology. We then invite 35 of those kids to join us as paid summer interns every summer. And they spend the morning in the Learning Lab with Melody and the afternoon working all around Vertex from the lab bench to computer sciences. And then we invite 2 of those students to become Vertex scholars. We offer them a full 4-year room and board and books and tuition scholarship to any UMass educational institution that they get into. And I'm going to introduce one of those scholars to you in a minute. And then from there, we have programs that support postdoctoral fellows and the development of young physicians and scientists who will discover the next cures for CF and other diseases. And David Altshuler, our CSO, has developed now a very rapidly expanding fellowship program here inside Vertex and outside of Vertex to help develop those folks all the way through their careers into young faculty positions. I also want to acknowledge Bottom Line. For those of you that don't know, an amazing organization that we work with that helps underprivileged kids who get into college stay in college and graduate. And they've taken graduation rates up from 30% to north of 80% with their programs. Just an absolutely incredible group of people who are dedicated to college kids. On the education side, I already recognized Superintendent Chang. I want to recognize Charlie Pagnam from the UMass Foundation. They administer our scholarships. And Ethan Berman, who I did see earlier from I2 Learning. Ethan is working with us on a new junior high school curriculum to completely change STEM education for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders and turn it into a problem-based learning set. We haven't announced it yet, so stay tuned. It's the teaser. I'm not even sure I told Tommy Chang about this yet, but I will soon, Tommy. It's really exciting, and we hope to roll it out in the next year or so. And then the final area of giving is being committed to being good neighbors in all of our communities, whether it's here in Boston, whether it's San Diego, where we have a research site, Paddington in London, or our UK site in Milton Park. We do a lot of different activities from our annual day of service, where more than 1,000 Vertex employees take an entire day to give back to the community. And we partner with many organizations, including the Boys and Girls Club, run by the Crafts, the ICA, the Children's Museum, the Martin Richard Foundation, and Citizen Schools. And we'll continue and expand those giving opportunities as we roll out this new program over the next 10 years. Finally, as part of our commitment, we're also announcing today the Vertex Foundation with an initial grant of $10 million. And to me, one of the most exciting things about the foundation is it includes a dollar-for-dollar employee matching program. Our employees often ask us, they all have their own charitable interests, how can we help them with their charitable giving? And so we've responded with a dollar-for-dollar match program so that every dollar they give to their favorite charity, Vertex will actually match in a way to extend and amplify those dollars. And I think that'll be a really important thing for our employees. I've already gotten about 100 emails, Stephanie, this morning asking, when does it start and how do we give? So it starts in 2018, so stay tuned and results will be coming for you. So I could stand here all day, as you could tell, and talk to you about programs and dollars and cents and the balance sheet for our charitable giving. But at the end of the day, charitable giving to me is just all about people. And so I thought I would end just with a very short story about a person who I think has been impacted by Vertex charitable giving, and that's Gladys Baez. So where is Gladys? She's back here. I saw Gladys this morning. I couldn't believe it because I first met her when she was a young high school kid, and she's now grown up into this beautiful young woman over the years as she's worked with us here at Vertex. She started as a science fair mentoree in our science fair mentorship program 4 or 5 years ago. She then was invited to those internships. She actually was here for several internship programs, and she became one of the first of our Vertex scholars. And she's now working with Bottom Line. She's a student at UMass Boston. She's pursuing an MD PhD. She wants to be an oncologist. And I've told Gladys that I know this program will be successful when 10 years from now, you're up here talking about the next Vertex giving. You know, to me, that's what this is all about. This is all about the long-term impact that it can have on people, especially kids, especially underprivileged kids and girls in science. We're really focused on that. And our success will be measured by making more Gladys. It's sort of as simple as that. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for coming here today to celebrate with us. It's my pleasure now to introduce Mayor Walsh. Again, I don't think he needs much introduction to this group. But we're especially excited to have him here because he has been such a great partner to Vertex over the years in all of our charitable giving initiatives and in what we're trying to do for patients. So, Mayor Walsh, thank you for being here.
Christmas in October. Thank you very much. I just said to Jeff, this is like Christmas in October. Thank you very much, Jeff. And I know the Congressman is going to come in a minute. Lauren, I was talking to Lauren a minute ago. We just talked a little bit, and she's going to come up and tell her story. A lot of people were introduced here today, and I just want to give a shout-out to a couple more people that are here, or actually groups of people. Madison Park in the house. There we go, Madison Park. Edward M. Kennedy. John D. O'Brien. Boston Day and Evening. Excel. Bingo. We got one, right? There we go. We got bingo. Those are our students from our schools, from our high schools in the city of Boston, and very proud of the work that they all do every single day. And I have a chance, along with the superintendent, to visit our schools every day. And when you go to our schools, you see some amazing stories in those schools of our young people wanting to learn. And the future of America are in our schools, and we're going to continue. There's a story in the paper today about our high schools in the globe, and we have to continue to push our schools for excellence. We have to make sure these young people, when they graduate, are on a pathway to college or a pathway to a career. And I want to thank them for their great work, because you guys make us proud every single day. And on top of it, a lot of those immigrant kids, like my mother and father, so thank you for being here too as well. And tell your parents thank you for bringing you guys here, because we love our city for everybody, so thank you. The spirit of exploration is what defines our city. It's the reason we're a global leader in life sciences. It's the reason we attract the brightest minds to our city from all over the world. And it's the reason why I'm standing here, quite honestly. My life was saved by cutting-edge cancer treatments I got when I was a kid. In 1974, I was diagnosed with Burkitt's lymphoma. I was treated at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and at the time they were trying a new drug and a new kind of cocktail, they call it, I think, of radiation and chemotherapy. You think about that and how far science has come so many years later. So I'm grateful for Boston having that exploratory vision, I guess, if you will, whatever the right word is, to do that, or I wouldn't be standing here. Boston certainly also has a legacy of rising to the occasion and solving the biggest challenges of our time. I'm proud that we're home to companies that are carrying on this legacy, companies like Vertex. Vertex is developing treatment that's saving people's lives, like Lauren. Vertex also, their commitment today, over $500 million, is going to expand access to life-saving treatments. I want to thank Jeff and everyone here at Vertex. I want to thank them for not just today, but for their support with our summer job program. I want to thank them for their mentorships in our schools. I want to thank them for your employees that work here, for your giving. I want to thank you for you being involved in the community. This company truly is a company that is engaged in every single aspect of the city of Boston. And today, the investment that's being made today is going to give more people an opportunity, a fighting chance. And you're also going to work on helping train more young physicians. On behalf of the city of Boston, I want to thank Vertex for giving back to our communities in such an amazing way today, and this really, truly is an amazing way. We know that Boston is a world leader when it comes to life sciences, and this is just beginning. Years from now, the city is going to generate treatments, so the advances they've made us, so the advances that we're going to see are going to be hard to imagine today, and that's because of the investments that Vertex is making. We're creating the future by investing in the next generation of explorers. Vertex has been a big part of that. Jeff has been a big part of that. For years, Vertex has been, as I mentioned, have been working with the Boston Public students to enrich their lives outside the classrooms. We've welcomed classes into their lab space and actually the kids build one of them on their own. They're proud to provide mentors and internships to introduce more young people to the STEM field. And obviously, I love the investment of STEAM because arts is such an important part of the future of our city and our society and our country and our culture that we have to do that. So I want to thank you for that. This company and the doors downstairs, when young people walk in, have made college a reality. I mentioned that a minute ago about some of our kids are immigrants or first generation. Their parents might not understand what it means to fill out a college application, to apply for college loans, and to be able to do that stuff. Mine didn't. Mine didn't understand that because they came from Ireland. The goal was to get us through high school and maybe to college and then get a job and raise a family. And that's what a lot of the immigrant families' goal is. Young people come into this building, they meet somebody who had a chance to go to college, and all of a sudden now their conversation is very different. Their outlook on life is very different. When they leave here at the end of the summer, their goals are changed. Their goals aren't about graduating and maybe getting a job. Their goals are, how do we go to a school? How do we get to an Ivy League school? How do we pursue something that's completely different? The employees that are here, I want to thank you for that as well. The commitment that you've made has made a world of difference to young people. They're helping students and letting students know that science isn't scary. You can do this. And that's something that's really important. The key is when it comes to helping young people build confidence and preparing them for the careers of the future. Again, I want to thank Vertex for being such a great corporate citizen here in the city of Boston and what they do. Through this commitment, Vertex expands its work with the Boston Public Schools, and the superintendent is excited. Their $50 million educational initiative will help give us more kids opportunities for STEM resources. And then the A is where we have to come in and do more with STEAM resources to make sure that we provide all the opportunities, particularly young women and students served from, it says underserved communities. I come from an underserved community in my remarks here. Underserved community means Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan. I wouldn't necessarily say they're underserved. I'd say that we have to overachieve in those neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods are really the areas that we got to focus on to make sure that people get opportunities to get into fields like the sciences. It's going to open learning labs up to more students, and it's also going to allow students to explore their scholarship programming and opportunities. What's happening here today is another piece of creating pipelines from pre-kindergarten to PhD. We're ensuring that this will be a city of exploration for generations to come. That's what's happening today. When we work across all sectors, we reach our goals. I want to thank all of you in this room for being part of today. I certainly want to thank Vertex and the leadership here for the investment. And the investment's great, but I know that much of the work is going to be done by many of the faces in front of me today, and I want to thank you. I also want to thank all of our private sector partners. Neil Sullivan from the PIC is here. Thank you, Neil, for your great work. Lauren Jones is here from Economic Development. Pat Hoey's here from our Boston Transportation Department. So it takes all of us to collaborate together to be successful. So again, thank you very much, and I'm going to bring, Jeff's going to come back up here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for being here and for your continuous support. So it's now my pleasure to formally introduce Lauren Weeks. I'm still not used to calling you Weeks. We'll get to that in a second. Lauren's an amazing 26-year-old young woman who was diagnosed with CF when she was 3 years old, I believe. Like most kids are diagnosed early. She's been taking Orkambi. She'll tell you that story. But I think most importantly, she's recently married and thinking with some really interesting things about her future. So I can't ever tell your story like you can, Lauren. Thank you for being here. Please come on up.
Not as tall as everyone else here. So I came to Vertex to speak to a small group a couple of years ago, and it was probably an eighth of the size of this room. So I'm happy to see everyone here, and I'm so honored to come back and get to speak at this amazing event. I'm really excited hearing everything that Jeff was talking about. So as we know, the past couple of weeks have been kind of a downer. There were all the hurricanes, shootings, the political climate. It wasn't uncommon for me when I opened up my daily news email to just stare in disbelief, thinking, what is wrong with the world? Feeling like there was little I could do to change it. But I remember what my mom always used to say, which she got from Mr. Rogers, when these horrible things happen, look for the helpers. The people who picked up people fleeing from the Jason Aldean concert and then turned around to get more. The communities in Puerto Rico and Dallas who lent a hand to a neighbor in need. The first responders who run toward the danger, not away from it. And the people who, after the dust has settled, most importantly, continue to help through donations or political activism, dedicating their lives to a cause they believe in, or performing simple acts of kindness to remind us that some of us humans still have a heart. Sometimes we get so exasperated by how horrible the world is and how horrible some humans are and how unfair everything is that we start to feel powerless, right? But I've learned that when you get mad enough about these things, you get this feeling in your gut where you feel compelled to do something about it and make it better. So growing up with cystic fibrosis, I was constantly reminded that there were helpers all around me. It started with my family. One night, my brothers were watching a news special about a man who needed a partial lung transplant. Transplant. I don't know if someone accidentally changed the channel from Nickelodeon or something. This doesn't seem like normal elementary school viewing, but here they were, and they had their full attention. So putting together that, oh, my sister has some lung problems, they proudly came to my mom and said, Mom, we've been thinking about it, and we decided we're each going to give Lauren a bit of our lungs. These guys were tiny, and they had hard enough to want to help their teeny little sister, even though she was kind of a pain in the ass. I never got in trouble. I was very spoiled, and I made them watch Barney when they wanted to watch Power Rangers. But they saw how tough that man had it on the news, and they thought, what can we do to help? Thinking back, though, I wish they would have followed through on that promise, because I totally would have been able to overtake my half-lunged brothers when they decided to swing me over their shoulder and body slam me on the couch, as older brothers do. As I grew up, though, I continued to be surrounded by helpers, people who decided to dedicate their lives to making sick kids like me feel better. From the nurses in the hospitals, to the doctors making my treatment plans, from the pharmacists filling my prescriptions, to the scientists developing it. When I was 15, I was rushed to the hospital because my lungs were filling with blood. I was coughing up cupfuls of this metallic-tasting fluid the same day that Tom Brady was trying to win his third Super Bowl. And even though the whole city of Boston was glued to their TVs that night, the hospital was filled with people who had saved my life. When my body went into shock from all the blood I lost, doctors rushed into the room to start a blood transfusion. And a nurse leaned over my bedside to explain what was happening and said, "This is Tom Brady's blood, you know." In the midst of what should have been terrifying, she actually made me laugh, knowing I'd be as strong as that guy throwing touchdowns in no time, and I could still eat tomatoes and dessert. And that night, I could trace back all the helpers, the person who donated that blood, the Catholic nun in the ICU who gave me the anointment of the sick, and of course, my mom, who was holding my hand the whole time. And, of course, Tom Brady for winning the Super Bowl that night. It was around that time that I was becoming increasingly acquainted with my own mortality. Though I knew CF was life-shortening and a pretty scary disease, up until that point, I thought I was immune from all that, just like every teenager thinks they're invincible. But as it does when you're a teenager, life slaps you upside the head and gives you a dose of reality. And if you're lucky, you grow stronger because of it. And I was lucky to have something a lot of teenagers didn't. I had hope. One day, I was scrolling through Facebook, and I saw an article about a new CF medication that was being researched. I read about my CFTR protein and how it worked, or didn't work, and how there was this company in Boston who was trying to correct that protein. I read about how this treatment would attempt to correct the very thing that caused my disease, rather than the slate of medications that simply treated its effects, like breaking up the mucus in my lungs or killing the bacteria. And I still remember sitting in the sunroom of my parents' house and just looking out the window, and there was a bird feeder there covered in birds, and I was just crying, imagining what my life would be like. At the time, they were in the beginning phases of their research. So, of course, I Googled how long it would take for a medication to go through the drug trials. And then I counted on my fingers. Okay, so by the time I graduate from college, assuming everything goes well, I might be able to take this medication. But I can't tell you, and those who are CF families in the room know this, how many times my family had heard about these breakthroughs. Shortly after I was diagnosed in '93, scientists were starting to figure out the genetics behind CF. In 10 years, the doctors said, they'll have this all figured out and CF won't be the disease it is today. 10 years would go by and we would wait. We'd do some fundraising, we'd pray a little bit, we'd keep waiting, and then we'd hear, oh, we haven't quite figured it out yet. Maybe another 10 years. So anytime we heard about these new breakthroughs, we would take it with a grain of salt, because after all, we were still living with this. So there was this vague sense of hope floating around in the back of my mind, but the waiting, it got frustrating. So we decided we would do what we could to accept this disease as it was. A short time after I got infused with Tom Brady's blood, I had a visit with a doctor who was filling in for mine. I did pulmonary function tests to see how my lungs were doing, and I saw the number on the chart going in a downward trend. This would be the third time that year that I would need to go to the hospital, and for me, that was unusual. The doctor said, I think it'd be easier if you just started to plan for being in the hospital a couple times a year. This horrified me. In fact, I was pretty pissed off at this doctor. Even though I knew I was sick, I couldn't fathom the fact that this was my new normal. So I decided, after all this time relying on helpers, I was going to help myself. I committed more fully to my medications, knowing if I skipped out on taking care of myself, I'd be back in the hospital, and that doctor would be right. All the while, I held on to that vague sense of hope for that drug company in Boston to move along in the trials. As I watched hopeful news of medicine progress through each phase, I applied to college, and I kept doing everything I could to stay healthy. Some days I saw the fruits of my labor, and other days, cystic fibrosis knocked me down regardless. After an unexpected hospitalization only 2 months into my freshman year at Stonehill College, I doubled down. I started dating a guy who lived in the dorm above mine, and he and I would meet outside before classes to jog around campus. He was a cross-country runner in high school, but he slowed down his pace to match mine and taught me what I needed to know about running, like how to breathe when you have a cramp, and to stop clenching my fist and to shake out my arms to make sure my body wasn't so tense, and what stretches to do when my hamstrings hurt. Soon, I wasn't just a person who went on runs. I was a runner, or at least that's what I told myself. And it wasn't long before I ran my first 5K. Kyle didn't know that he was a helper then, but my lungs were thanking him with each clear breath. I went 3 years, nearly the rest of my college career, before I needed to go to the hospital again. And wished I could remember that doctor's name so I could rub it in her face. But still, I watched that trend line in my PFTs slowly declining despite my best efforts. Senior year of college, I got knocked down once again, but this time, while I sat at home missing classes, I read articles about people who started taking Kalydeco, who could, in the simplest sense of the word, breathe. This hope fueled me through to graduation, into my first job, then my first apartment, and even during a bout of pneumonia in the middle of all that. Every birthday, when I blew out the candles of my cake, I wished for a cure for CF. But as I entered adulthood, my wish got a little bit more specific. I wished for drugs like Kalydeco to be approved for me and everyone else with CF. It took a couple more years past the number I'd come with that day, watching the birds outside my parents' window, for Orkambi to finally be approved. You know how every generation has a day where everyone remembers where they were when we landed on the moon, when JFK was shot, when 9/11 happened? My day is going to be where I was when Orkambi was approved. I was in a tuxedo shop in Bangor, Maine, as Kyle picked up his suit for his brother's wedding. The groomsmen were a bit confused when I ran out onto the sidewalk after I answered the phone to my mom screaming, and when they walked out to me crying on the phone. Kyle and I drove to the hotel, listening to Andy Grammer's song, Honey, I'm Good, and I belted it out of the windows and bounced up and down in my seat. And that was 2 years ago. So last week, I was at the doctor, and he had a medical student with him. He showed her the graph of my pulmonary function tests, and I followed the line through the story I just told you, scanning across. And I watched that dip the year Tom Brady and me became blood lovers. And I watched it keep going down when that doctor told me to expect spending more time in the hospital. I watched the slower downward trend through my running years. And then in 2015, I saw the line change directions to an upward trajectory. Look, he said right there, that's when she started taking Orkambi. So 2 years ago, as I mentioned, I had the pleasure of meeting and thanking the people who work at Vertex. And I learned about how tedious this work is. How many compounds were tested and tweaked and retested. How every single day you went home knowing you had failed to discover the next great medication. But when I talked to people who work here, they were filled with hope. Remember those people who get that feeling in their gut and need to do something to make the world a better place? That's everyone in this place. They are the helpers I looked for hope during all those CF catastrophes I went through. And shortly after I started Orkambi, when I was talking to a group here, I told them about how I was pestering my boyfriend Kyle to propose. It didn't take long before he was down on one knee at a beach in Falmouth, Mass, the day after we had run the 7-mile Falmouth Road Race for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. So Orkambi gets you diamonds. And less than 2 months ago, we stood on top of a mountain in Maine and read our handwritten vows to one another. In mine, I told him about how today was a miracle. And everyone in the audience knew what I was talking about. I was talking about that line that changed directions on my PFTs. A life that opened up thanks to people who decided to dedicate their lives to making people like me breathe easier. So I'm not surprised that you all decided to branch out into a foundation to help people in the community. It's who you, everyone at Vertex, has shown me who you are throughout this whole endeavor. There's so much that needs to be done. People who need helpers in life that needs changes. And I hope we can all work today. I hope we can all walk away today inspired to do what we can to remind each other that the world ain't all bad. We can all be helpers and make a small blip on someone's graph and send their day in an upward trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kyle, also. I think for those of you that don't work here, haven't been here, you understand why we all come to work every day. Thank you, Lauren. So, a little hard to introduce more speakers, but timing's everything, Congressman. It is my pleasure to introduce Congressman Kennedy. I said a lot of things about you before you came. They were mostly good, I promise you, but mostly about how you've been a supporter of us at Vertex, but even more importantly of education, STEM education across the Commonwealth and across the country. The thing I always say about Congressman Kennedy is we just need more like him. So thank you so much for coming.
Jeff, thanks for all those nice things you said. I'm not so grateful for the order of the speaking program, I will say. So, Lauren, one, I think you can probably tell there's not a dry eye in the place. Thank you for putting a personal touch on this in a way that very few others can. Thank you for having the courage to share your story. Thank you for giving voice, obviously not only to what so many folks here dedicate their lives to do, but to what science and education and dedication and stewardship can mean when you keep patients and families at the center of that focus. Thank you for sharing those stories about bird feeders and those little life moments that add up to a lifetime. And thank you for being willing to share all of that back to inspire so many people in the room today, and at least one member of Congress as well. So thank you. Truly, truly grateful. To Mayor Walsh, I've been bouncing around following him all day as well. I don't know where you're going next, but we'll follow you wherever that is too. And of course, to all the folks here at Vertex, so grateful to join you. Thank you for your commitment to our community. Thank you for commitment to STEAM education. Thank you for your commitment to Massachusetts, to our Commonwealth, and to the future. And also to families that are here, to the families that are here, that have been personally touched by CF and by the innovations that Vertex has brought to all of us. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your willingness to share your own stories. Thank you for continuing to push us as a community, as a society, as a country forward, because sometimes we need that push. I have had the extraordinary privilege to work with Dr. Leiden and the Vertex team over the course of the past few years as part of the STEM Council, a initiative set forth actually by former Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray, carried on by Governor Deval Patrick, and carried on by Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito, trying to integrate and create a systemic approach to STEM education across our Commonwealth. I have been always impressed by the work that you all do here, the dedication of Dr. Leiden and you all as a company, and the commitment to our communities. I have tried a number of times, I've gotten a number of tours through your facilities, I've tried a number of times to figure out what it is that you do. It goes over my head pretty quickly. But we do see the results, as Lauren so eloquently articulated. We have had the opportunity, Jeff and I as well, to look at what our Commonwealth does well, to amplify those efforts, and to try to replicate them. And guided by some of the work that we've seen across Massachusetts, we've been able to try to spread those efforts nationally as well through legislation and through additional grant programs that have garnered broad bipartisan support down in Washington, D.C. I was able to author and pass something called the STEM Gateways Act to open doors to STEM education for women, minorities, and students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. Many of you know some of these stats. If you can believe them, they actually do happen to be true. Women make up of nearly half of our entire workforce, but only a quarter of the jobs in STEM fields. In 2013, there were 3 states where not a single woman took the AP computer science test. Between 2009 and 2013, nearly a quarter of women entering college hoped to pursue a STEM major, yet fewer than 9% graduated with a STEM degree. In 2011, 11% of our entire workforce was African American, but only 6% of STEM workers are Black. Only 1/3 of high schools in the United States, where at least 3/4 of the students were Black or Latino, even offered calculus. So in our efforts to address this gap, socially engaged companies like Vertex are absolutely irreplaceable. Unfortunately, civically engaged businesses are a proud tradition in our Commonwealth. With this investment, not only in STEM, but in making that conversion and that jump to STEAM, local community and nonprofits will be supported by Vertex, and your company will continue to alter and improve the lives of so many that may never have been able to receive these treatments without some of the investigations and studies done in their labs. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to play a small part in this announcement, and I look forward to working with you in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman, for all you do for all of us and for STEM. That concludes today's program, but before you go, we have some gift bags for each of our speakers and guests, and I did want to just emphasize one very, I think, neat thing about those gift bags. You can see that down here. They each contain a framed piece of art that was created by Fallon Finnegan, who unfortunately was a CF patient who passed away from CF. Her parents are here today. They started the Hearts for Hope Foundation, which I mentioned before, to provide not only financial support, but awareness and support for CF families across the Commonwealth. So it's a pleasure to have you here. It's a pleasure to have her here in the form of that art. And it's a pleasure to be able to give that to all the speakers. Thanks again, everyone, for coming today, for celebrating with us, and we look forward to updating you as we go.